It's so funny. I'm like getting all like emotional thinking about it. Because tonight, actually, we do have a couple of people that we had interviewed during that process will be coming to the book launch tonight, who I interviewed again for this book. I'm just so honored to be able to represent their stories. Yeah.
Well, the first thing I want to know is, I guess, how are you feeling now that this thing is finally out?
Oh, my goodness. Well, my book, I really do feel that I wrote it in partnership with my ancestors. And you can feel that, in the fibers of the book, the sense of magic, the sense of like generations of ancestors really helping me bring this book into being, that it feels like quite this moment. It feels like it's the opening for both of us. It's the book birthday for all of us. So I'm celebrating all of them for sure.
Is there an additional pressure when Scarborough, your last book, does so well? Because, I mean, I don't know if anyone could have ever predicted it, but not only does it, become this big thing on Canada Reads, it sells 1 trillion copies. It turns into a film that wins, I think, every Canadian Screen Award that could ever win. When all of that happens, is there an extra pressure on the next book?
I try not to put that pressure on myself because I guess for art, I don't think I try not to make it about me at all. I try to make it about what do my ancestors want to say? And then it's not about me. It's just that I stand by whatever energy is coming through me. And sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels good, sometimes it doesn't. And so in this particular case, this book felt quite amazing to birth into this world, given that it was actually written at the beginning of lockdown. And I knew that what my ancestors were telling me were write a book that feels like a hug, write a book that feels like love. And that's definitely where we landed at.
What do you mean that you didn't write this book, that your ancestors wrote it?
So I believe that I am just a conduit to the whispers of the universe, and that my ancestors are speaking through me, and all I do is write down what they say. The words are perfect the way that they are. Just put it down onto the paper. I believe that my editor, Jennifer Lambert from HarperCollins Canada, that she's also has her team of ancestors that are telling her how to guide me, and we work together in order to make a book. And the beautiful thing about that, sometimes in some cultures we've called that a muse or whatever, right? But for me, I feel like it's spirit. It's a spirit work, and I really do feel like sometimes I'm typing, and it's like all I'm hearing is the sound of the keyboard. All I am feeling is just like this energy running through me, and it just falls onto the page. And what's so beautiful about that is that it's not about ego. It's not about me trying to be an amazing writer. It's not about me trying to create something that everyone's going to love. If I just commit to bringing those words that they're wanting to put out into this physical plane, if I just think about that I'm just a conduit, then I just let it out.
Here's what I don't understand about that.
Yes.
And I fully respect, of course, and understand what you're saying.
Yes.
But I have a lot of questions about your own lived experience and your own life and the way that you might approach writing and the way that you might approach things that might have informed your own writing. Am I wrong to ask any of that? Does all of your writing just come from this other place, and your own life and your own experience has nothing to do with it? Or
I think that more like my ancestors are constantly moving me to and fro with regards to what experiences are going to be coming my way. And so there's a thing that happens sometimes that, while I'm going through life, there'll be something that somebody says that makes me go, oh, there's an image. And it'll strike me in a particular way.
I understand.
And then, so for example, for Scarborough, I understood that, I had a home daycare, living hand to mouth, and I could sense these conversations around me from frontline workers saying, with this election, I don't know if my job is going to be around tomorrow. And I don't know if all of this work that I've done building these bridges, I don't know if it's just going to be, tossed out the window tomorrow simply because a change of government and a change of focus, right, of priority. And I wanted to capture that precarity because of the fact that I could sense it. There was these conversations being had around me that I was like, there's something here, and I can feel it. And it's so funny, even telling you this now, Tom, is I can feel it on my forearms, that it's like, oh, there's a message coming forth, right? I'll see images that are like evocative and I just so yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Now I know what you mean by some people would call that the muse, some people would call that the spirit, some people have called that like the universe. You know, Paul Simon talks about sitting around waiting. Paul Simon has said that his songwriting process is just waiting, sitting around waiting for that thing to come. And for you, in your experience and your I don't know if it's definition or interpretation or reality of that thing that you're waiting for, or that thing that presents itself to you, is your ancestors through you.
Yes,
I understand.
absolutely. Yeah.
So now I can ask you about you, and now we can talk about you. Okay.
You can talk about.
So I thought the best way to talk about the story of us is I actually wanted to start by getting you to put on some headphones.
Oh, certainly.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. So just we're just going to get you to put them on. We're going to play a clip, and then we're going to take them off.
Ooh, okay.
We're going to take them off again.
Sounds like a plan.
So I want to play a clip that might talk a little bit about how this book started for you. Take a listen.
I give to you my tiny, your tiny baby. We give to you for each household a brown I give.
So Catherine, you can take your headphones off. What did we just hear?
What we heard was a song from the play Future Folk, which was created by the Sulong Theater Collective, which I used to be the artistic director of. The collective consisted of writers and performers Karen Encheta, Aura Carcueva, Romeo Candido, and we collectively created a piece which was a 45-minute play where the audience could live through the emotional truths of the Live-In Caregiver program. And it was presented at Theater Pass Marai.
Would I be correct to think that thing we just heard and what you just described might have led to this book?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And I just got chills because I have not heard that song in such a long time. Yes, the research for the book was definitely, I would say, the spine of what you hear of MG's experiences. So when we had done the research for the book, I have to be transparent, is that all of us were, except for Aura, were Canadian born. And we all have our citizenship. And we wanted to make sure that we captured the essence of what it was like to be a migrant worker here in Canada under the notorious Live-In Caregiver program. And that meant that we had to do countless interviews with people who were still under the program and listening to them, positive, negative, challenging, wondrous stories of their journey here and their choices to be away from their family, to observe the 24 months that they need to observe before possibly given the chance to ask for permanent residency and for possibly to get their families to join them in the future. And it was very humbling, being someone who is Canadian born, to be able to ask people these questions. And as someone who has served as a caregiver for many years, I used to have a home daycare. I owned a home daycare. The thing is that I owned a home daycare. I didn't have to ever worry about if one of my parents, if they were not pleased with the service that I gave them, I could just tell them to go. I had a lot of privilege around that. I've never lived in with a family. And so understanding the dangers, the vulnerability of this migrant population because of the fact that they have to live at their employer's house was something that was really eye-opening for us. And definitely from that research, and also I'll have to mention too is that some of the research also came from writers Lisa Codrington and Mary Beth Bajan, that we were able to sew together a 45-minute play that was quite hard hitting for a lot of folks, because we named the audience as a fellow caregiver, and we're like, this is a guidebook for you to understand what it means to go through this 24 months. So it was wonderful. One of the most memorable moments was like our last show. I think it was the second to last show or something. We had a free event for caregivers that day, and people were just like laughing and crying to the point where there was one point at the end of the play where the mom is reunited with her children, and one child actually doesn't recognize her mom, and all of these women just covering their eyes and just crying. It was one of the most memorable moments of my life as a performer. And it's so funny, I'm like getting all like emotional thinking about it. Because tonight, actually, we do have a couple of people that we had interviewed during that process will be coming to the book launch tonight, who I interviewed again for this book. I'm just so honored to be able to represent their stories. Yeah.
Do you want a tissue or anything?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Are you sure? We got a couple over there.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm cool. But it's just so awesome. Like, being an artist is really, really awesome. It's such an honor. And, you know, with the privilege that I have as someone whose stories are listened to, I feel just thankful to be able to give them the microphone that they so deserve.
Tell me about MG.
Well, MG...
This is the lead character in the
Yes, the lead character. She is a person who had survived the explosion of the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines way back in the 90s and or 80s. And so she ends up having to leave her hometown for Manila and starts to live this such intense financial hardship to the point where she decides to leave to become an overseas Filipino worker. So she wants to support both her husband's sister and her two children, so her niece and her nephew. And first she goes to Hong Kong, and then she goes to Toronto, Canada. And the idea is that because of the living caregiver program here in Canada, the draw for her to go to Canada is the fact that if she does observe the 24 months, it means that she has a chance to be reunited with her husband and start a life here in Canada.
If she does the 24 months living with the family,
that's right.
She then gets to stay in Canada,
yes.
and then she can be reunited with her family again.
Yes.
So it's like a period of just 2 years that you got to get through
yes.
in order to kind of get your family back.
And it's 24 months. It does not. Sometimes there are breaks in those 24 months, and there's a lot of pressure for a person to be able to observe those 24 months, even if they are being abused in a household, to stay with them. Because if you can imagine, if they go and they try to find another employer who's not starving them, because that does happen, cheating them out of money, it means that there might be a window of time that they're waiting and waiting and waiting for another employer to come around. And it means because of the fact that there's a certain amount of time that you have to observe those 24 months, it could be that you have to start all over again.
Right.
Or you just get deported. So
MG finds herself living in this home.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So she first she does like a series of families here. So one couple that is a well-to-do couple that they're expecting their child, and she witnesses the birth of this child. Then she ends up going to another family who really start to abuse her financially. And I don't want to give too much away, but it becomes like this really abusive situation where her time is being taken advantage of, and her finances are being taken advantage of. And then she ends up having to leave there. And ends up becoming the personal support worker for an elder by the name of Liz. And from there's like this beautiful relationship that blossoms between her and Liz. And both of them are really trying to find chosen family. And that's where this beautiful story really starts to blossom and develop.
I want to talk about Liz in just a second, but when you were doing the research for this book, and you were looking into the overseas worker program, and you were looking at the live-in worker program, what was the thing that surprised you the most in your research?
The thing that surprised me the most was the use of food as a way of punishing someone. So sometimes it would be as simple as, so if you were going to go and make us food, our family food, if
I was the worker?
Yeah, if you were the worker,
Yeah.
you would make us food. You'd make a swank dinner, but then you'd be expected to either eat nothing or just like a little sandwich inside of the kitchen. That surprised me, and it really, I was so quite offended by it, but it doesn't matter how offended I was. Like, there's nothing that someone in that position would be able to do to be able to fight back, because all they're thinking of is,
I got to get through this time.
I just got to get through this time. The other thing that didn't necessarily surprise me, just more like enraged me, was just the use of families getting together to have a caregiver take care of multiple families' children. And
there would be a couple of families
Yes.
all joining together, getting a live-in worker.
That's right.
Who would then be sort of, as opposed to working with one family,
That's
which is
right.
the point, which is the plan.
yeah, and also what they're paid for.
Yeah, to work with a number of families and kind
Yes.
of become like almost like a teacher or a caregiver to a bunch of kids.
Yes. So what you expect in like a daycare, but it's like one woman, hardly any breaks, if at all,
Yeah.
taking care of numerous children. So that it enraged me. It didn't surprise me, but it definitely enraged me. And it definitely didn't surprise me just because of the fact that as someone who had a home daycare, I would say not all of the families that employ me, but definitely a good number of them cheated me out of time and money. So
you saw that exploited. You saw the potential
Yes.
and also examples of that exploitative relationship.
Yes.
As you mentioned earlier, you had privilege, you had autonomy,
Absolutely.
you had agency, and yet as you ran a home daycare, you were not immune.
No, and the thing is, I could always say, if you're not going to pay me, then bye.
Yeah.
But and even then, it hits you hard because you're in such a bind, making so little per head.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, it makes sense that by law you can't have any more than 5, and only maximum of only 2 of them can be non-walkers, and you know, like all these things that you have to abide by law-wise. That it hits you financially if you do say goodbye to a family, if they're harming you in some way.
Yeah.
And if so, it hurts, but it doesn't. It's not necessarily. I can figure out a way to survive. Whereas people who are under this system, the live-in caregiver program, is that imagine trying to draw a boundary with folks who you live in their house. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to draw that boundary. And so I guess, like, you know, when it comes to the LCP, I mean, I definitely think that a lot of folks find it necessary, especially to be able to afford child care.
LCP being live-in care program.
The live-in caregiver program. However, we just have to look at the system itself. Is that I don't think that it's healthy to live in your employer's house.
One thing I found interesting was the dynamic. I was hoping to have a drink of tea, and I want to get you to read a little bit from the book.
Yes, please.
Because there was a part that I found interesting, a dynamic in your novel here, about sort of like how the power dynamic is not just exclusively from the parents to the live-in care worker, but also from the kids to the care worker. Could you read the part we isolated there?
Sure. And this is from from Tita Connie, who is a distant relative of MG.
When I came to Canada, I thought at first, wow, people here are so nice. Much better than the abuse I endured when I nannied in Dubai. They tell all their friends that they treat you like family, but you know what? Canadians are so good at expecting more, even on your days off, even when their kids act like monsters.
Even when their kids act like monsters, more and more and more from Canadian families. Was this an experience you would have heard about when you were doing your research?
Absolutely. There seemed to be this fluidity around a day off.
Yeah.
So one of the things, the most humbling things, was when we were doing research for the play, I remember I thought that it was a good idea that we're going to have this one day, we can invite folks, and we would do all of our research, and everyone in the collective would basically just rotate amongst these people to be able to interview them and get all the information. That way it would save them time. We wouldn't bother them. And anyway, we thought it was a good idea until we realized that not all of them had the same day off. Not all of them had a day off, which was really enraging because everyone deserves rest. And I realized that if we were to do these interviews, we actually had to do them on the fly. Oftentimes, if we would just go to a playground, then we would ask people questions. We also worked with organizations to help us connect to folks, but the interviews were quite swift, and we really had to work around, again, this fluid rest time that they were allotted. So fluid that, it would just move day to day until the point where, it was just whenever it was convenient for the employing family.
Right.
Yeah.
The dynamic that I was talking about there, when the kids are monsters.
Yes.
The idea that the kids are not innocent bystanders here. Even the kids, and let's not demonize them. You only are the product of what you come up with.
Yes.
But the dynamic in the book, especially with MG, it felt like, or with any of the living care workers, it feels like the dynamic can be like parent and kid versus the home care worker. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Oh no, I absolutely know what you mean. As someone who had a home daycare, I can definitely say is that, white supremacy is taught from the moment that kids are born.
Yeah.
And as a brown woman, is that I got a sense that even toddlers understood who was boss when they came into my daycare, right? And that had to be unlearned because as an activist, I was like, I will not tolerate that. And that was really difficult for them. And so what I can say is that it's, when parents say, my child is colorblind, it's like, that's not only just like an ableist thing because, using the word blind, but it's also, it's not true because if a child can see like a yellow block or a red shirt, they can also see white supremacy. They can see how their parents move through the world, how much privilege they have. And it's not my imagination. It really was something that I had to get my kids of a certain privilege to be able to unlearn because otherwise they weren't welcome into my daycare.
How much can I talk about Liz?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we can talk about Liz as long as we understand sort of the flip side being of MG's identity as well, gender-wise. Yeah.
That's what I mean. I don't want to give away too much about Liz.
Yeah, well, it's not this major reveal. Gender is not necessarily a reveal. So we can say that MG is cisgender.
Yeah.
And Liz is a trans woman.
Talk to me a little bit about their relationship.
Well, at first, MG, coming from this really conservative, Catholic, Filipino upbringing, she is almost embarrassed by the idea of anybody being queer. There's this one point in the book where she sees someone who's queer and her cheeks get red and she's just like, why does he act that way? And why does he dress like that? Why would you put yourself in that position? To then meeting Liz and really taking on the job out of necessity because she needs to find somewhere to work to observe the 24 hours of the living caregiver program. And she understands that, elders are kind of annoying because it's not like children where I can actually just really engage with them. There's the entire thing about her ableism, not really understanding dementia, not really understanding how to take care of an elder who has dementia. And then another part of it is that she at first is kind of confused by the entire idea of someone being trans. She's thinking that it's like some kind of weird like lie that someone's telling themselves, and that she's going to uphold a lie. And slowly realizing, thanks to very patient people from the trans community, saying, actually, Liz isn't lying. Liz is a woman. And the more you understand who she is as a person, the more we think that this relationship between you and her, like as a caregiver and client, is going to actually work, right? So she does, like, there's like this really, I really wanted to show like what the journey of allyship could look like. That it's not perfect. It's not in a straight line. She makes mistakes.
Yeah.
But she slowly understands like the humanity of Liz, to the point where then she realizes Liz's illustrious past, and we can leave that.
But there was a question I had, because I mean, Liz, I think we can say this, Liz experiences Alzheimer's or dementia. Yes. Liz also has, this trove of VHSs and, various sort of memories that either due to like floods or due to Alzheimer's are lost.
Yes.
I was wondering if there was something to be said in what you were writing there about sort of like how susceptible queer histories are to being lost.
Oh, thank you so much for asking this question. Because, folks of my age, we really feel that we have so few elders because of the AIDS crisis, right? It's almost like we walk around with like these holes in the sky, thinking about like all the elders that we had lost, but we had never learned from. And people find it funny to think that like I'm 45 years old and I really feel that I'm going into the space. My chosen brother, Kusha, and we feel like our birthdays are a day apart. And we're like, oh, we're going into queer elderhood. We have to, because of the fact that there's so few elders that we feel we have to take that place right away, right? And that's why I'm fine. Like, I really feel like, look at me in my fancy hat and, my big purse out in the green room. Like, I feel like I'm reaching auntie status, like, sooner than a lot of people. And I'm perfectly fine with it.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think that the more youth see that we can survive, that we have a place in this world is really important. And that's the thing about, like, documentation and queerness is that, so because of the fact that we've often been silenced and erased,
like Liz,
that so many of us have been so smart to become documentarians. So look at someone such as like Chase Joint, for example, who is a renowned trans documentary filmmaker. And there's so many before him of like people who have worked really hard to document in very low rent ways. And you can see it with Liz, is that it's with VHS, right? That she's capturing a moment in time. And for her, I guess her angle is, I'm going to just talk to trans people about what their life is like so that we won't forget. And that's what MG finds. She finds these tapes and realizes, wait, I'm supposed to save these because I think that Liz's story needs to be told.
Yeah. Your mother was a great Filipino folk dancer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Who worked at TD
yes.
for like 30 years. Right?
Yes.
And she just passed on not that long ago.
Yes, in 2017. It was the same year that Scarborough came out. Yeah.
Does having a mother who was an incredibly important figure in sort of this really great, wonderful cultural practice, who had this sort of other life she presented from like 9 to 5 all day.
Yes.
Does that make you think about legacy, history differently?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Legacy is such a big word. It's such a great word to use for this because, growing up.
What was her name?
Her name was Catherine Hernandez. She was a pioneer of Filipino folk dance education here. She really raised us to understand that as people of the Filipino diaspora, that it was our duty to keep those traditions alive so that we won't forget where home is. Because, when you're part of the diaspora, it's really difficult. Like, it's so easy to lose your language, which we did. I lost my language. It's easy to lose so many things about yourself. But if I was to hear like a certain rhythm of, for example, the Singkil bamboo poles clapping together, I know how to walk through those poles. I know how to move my fans. I know the songs to sing, and I know that I found home. So I'm so thankful for those teachings that I. Even writing this book, even though I haven't been to the Philippines in so long because of just the reality of life, that I still was able to sort of point my needle in the right direction and really get into the minutia of what it was like to live in the Philippines in the 80s, and having it fact checked obviously by dear friends who had lived in the Philippines at that time. That I know that home is still inside of me. I know it every time that there's an ice storm. Okay, Tom, like.
What do you mean?
I know that my body doesn't belong in this cold weather.
That's the way I feel when it's too warm. when it's the summer in Toronto, I'm like, I'm not built for this. I'm supposed to be around fog.
Oh my God.
Yeah, fog and cold water. I understand
I totally
that.
get it.
So what you're saying is that because your mother, even though she had this other job and she had this day-to-day job, it was so important for her to make sure that you knew where you came from, the traditions, not just where you came from, but the traditions and the things, the elements of where you come from.
Yes.
That when you were writing this book, you were thinking about legacy, you were thinking about history,
Absolutely.
You were thinking about what we all pass on to one another.
Yes. And the thing about this is that the legacy is actually inside of the body, which you understand because of the fact that this beautiful story of friendship between MG and Liz is actually told from the perspective of MG's child, her newborn baby.
Yeah. That now all makes a lot more sense to me now.
Yes. So, because like, why not? I mean, like every author, you understand when you're making your characters is that it's like you have to live and breathe them. It's like it's like you're putting chemistry together in order to like bake bread, practically, right? You really have to breathe them into being. And how else can I get inside of the character than actually being inside the character? So this book, the idea is that when someone who is able to bear children, when they're born, they are born with all of the eggs inside of them already. So I thought, what would happen if I was to start the story told from the point of one of those eggs slowly coming to be, and also waiting to become a human in like the physical plane, hoping for the chance to experience all of the things, even negative things. How what would happen if that's an actual character in the book? And again, with regards to ancestors writing this alongside of me, I remember feeling that like, oh, baby, really? Is that what you want me to do? Okay, sure. Originally, I wanted to be two parts. First told through the point of view of MG's baby, and then second part told through Liz's heart. And I was like, no, this is getting too complicated. Yeah, let's just keep it to. And I'm glad that we did. That we kept it to MG's baby because of how the book unfolds. Very thankful. So thankful for this choice. And also I love babies. And when you're holding a baby and you're like, why are they? When they're sleeping, you're like, what are they thinking of? When they're like, they're smiling, or like, what are you smiling at? You've just been inside this entire time. Like, what are you thinking?
It's a blank slate.
It's a blank slate. But is it a blank slate?
Yeah, but is it a blank slate? What's in there? What's in there already? You said the story of us, you said this at the beginning of the interview too, and you also said it in what I was reading about the book. You said, the story of us is one of two novels I wrote during lockdown, and I wanted it to feel like a warm hug to all my readers.
Yes.
You read a lot. You read a lot about really tough things. I mean, that live-in home care worker program is a tough thing, no matter what your stance is on it. It's a tough thing. Abuse, marginalization, these things are tough.
Yes.
Why is it important that when you write about tough stuff, it feels like a warm hug?
I guess that's the reality of.
Do you know what I mean?
Surviving. Absolutely. It's resilience, right? We're looking at two different people. One that is surviving a diaspora, and one that is surviving being disconnected from people that she knows and the reality that she understands because of dementia. And they're meeting in the middle and becoming chosen family. It's resilience on both ends because, as someone who has survived the diaspora myself, is that there are lots of people that I consider my chosen family, that my parents, they had to make our aunts and uncles because of family being completely disconnected from in the Philippines, is that we've reconfigured ourselves so that, these are the people we're going camping with or seeing every weekend, and we're making them family because that's how we survive. We need to have family. We need to have roots in our language. Also, being a queer person is that, for those of us who are orphaned and are not connected to our blood family anymore, is that you have to reconfigure who are my brothers, who are my sisters, who are the elders that I can contact to give us guidance. And so what it is that where there are people who are choosing how they are loved in this world, they're reparenting themselves, they're refamilying themselves, right? And to me, that's such a beautiful way of showing that we matter in this world, is that I deserve love. I deserve to have a place in this world. And I deserve to belong to someone. And that's what happens with MG and Liz. And I'm hoping that people understand, especially with the pandemic, is that you belong. We can love each other. We can choose each other. And when we meet each other in the middle, such beautiful things can happen.
I really love talking to you.
I love talking to you. I can't wait to see you at the next event.
I know. I like doing this even more than I love eating shrimp on a stick and talking, saying, "Is that Margaret Atwood?" Catherine, thanks so much for coming in. Congratulations on the book.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. Always, always.